Hello, everyone. This is Ted Goff here with Michigan CNC Webinar. We do an online webinar once a month. We try to do it on the first Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Once in a while, we will not have a seminar if there's a holiday or we don't have a presenter that month. But typically, each Tuesday, first Tuesday of every month, we have one. If you would like to be on our list, you just send us an email, and we'll put you on the notification list. We normally send out 2 emails a month. We send out one the week before, and then the day of, reminding you that we're going to have a webinar that night. Tonight we have the guest of Scott Thompson. Scott owns Willow Creek Gallery in Alaska. He is a pretty popular artist in that area, and he has his own gallery. He has a large CNC machine, and he has been doing quite a bit of work in 3D modeling, and I just admire his work all the time. And he has volunteered his time tonight to give us a few tips and tricks about 3D modeling. And so with that little introduction, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presenter role. Whoops. Hold on for a second. I have turned the presenter role over to Scott. I almost turned it over to the wrong person. Turn it over to Scott, and then Scott can go ahead and begin his presentation. So once he accepts a presenter role, we'll go to his screen in the room. Okay, thanks, Scott.
All right. Well, hopefully you guys can see a Merry Christmas train on there right now. Is that what you guys are seeing?
Yes, we are.
Very cool. So this is a model that's just coming off my table right now. Now can you see a little owl that's sitting on top of it? Okay, so that's a chainsaw owl I did a couple of weeks ago and did a little CNC sign underneath it. So I do an awful lot. I started with a lot of chainsaw carving. I also paint. That's a 36-inch mule deer painting I did a while back. This is some snow carving. Did that pop up? A bright pink?
Yeah, looks great.
How to train your dragon, sign of snow carving. So they give us a 10-foot block of snow, and we used to travel around the northern United States wherever they had snow festivals, and we do snow car carving. And those are all done with no power tools, so you can only use hand saws and chisels and shovels and axes and whatever else. We used curry combs, horse curry brushes to kind of sand and get smooth areas, and lots of chisels and pocket knives and stuff like that in snow. And unlike ice, you're allowed to use, we did a lot of ice carving too, and there you're allowed to use power tools and ice carving. So, and there's a chainsaw carving I did in front of the store last year. That's kind of one of those fun pieces. So my background, this is all the setup to tell you guys that my background is an artist. I was telling Ted earlier today, and as I just demonstrated, I am not a technical guy. I'm not a computer guy, so I get choked up on computer stuff all the time. So if you ask hard questions, you'll probably get muted. I'm going to tell you so. Well, what I wanted to show you today is I work in Aspire. So I'm going to do a piece with a crappie bass in it for you guys. I modeled the crappie bass a few months ago and have sent it off to a few guys, and they all want to know, well, how do you create, all the environment? I mean, it's like a lot of you guys pick up a model of a deer or a wolf or something, you want to create some environment around them first. So I'm going to show you the tools that I use to kind of frame up an individual model. Let's see. Grab. I'm going to allow Charles to join. Let's see if that's got me. There we go. I'm going to move these over here because there we go. Now I got modeling tools back. So I'm going to show you. So this is a 24-inch. Somebody else coming in. This is a 24-inch piece. I usually start out by setting up, go into these screens, and some of this will be a little redundant that see this regularly. But job size, I'll go in and set up job size. And in this case, I'm doing 24 by 24 inches, and you can see over here it's an 1.5 inch board, so this will probably be something I glued up. I have it in high resolution. I commonly use, when I'm modeling, I use this slate black, just because I like the way shadows show up on it. It helps me visualize and see stuff better. So I get that set up. So basically 1.5 inches. If I'm building a model, like when I have the crappie bass, I build them 3 feet wide and 4 inches thick, so I had lots of space to work on that. Here I got a smaller one. I'll show you how I import them. So I've created a lot of vectors already on this. You can see, so I used the polygon tool to create the frame vectors. These 2 out here that are apart. I'm not going to go through that. I'm assuming you guys have played with that kind of stuff a little bit, but you can play with so I'll just delete that one out of there. But so I have 2 polygons here that are parallel to each other. That's going to form my frame. So the board's 1.5 inches thick. So I want some of these elements, like the branches and some of the rocks and maybe part of the fish, to come out of the frame, because I don't like to have everything just stuck inside a frame. I like to bring it outside of it a little bit for artistic reasons. So what I've gone in with and created these vectors. So I've got some tree branches and stuff like that. But so we're going to start out by, the first thing I'm going to do is create this frame. I'll split the screen by using this screen splitter up here. Let's see if is there a way? I'm going to probably turn off all your faces because it won't let me click on someone. So I set that up so you can see this or split. So I'm going to click on these 2 vectors together and hold down Shift. If I can click on that second vector. And I'm going to go over to Modeling tab and click on Modeling. And I want to create a flat frame. So I don't want any angle here. I'm going to set it for 1.3 inches thick. So remember, I have 1.2 inches of wood. We're going to play, and when we're all done with this model, we're going to set the depth slightly differently. But I want this whole playing field. I want 1.5 inches to play in. So it's going to be 1.3 inches thick. There is no curvature. There's no actual final height model. And I'm going to just label this as frame. And I'm going to hit Apply. And we get a frame. So it's a little bit less thick than my materials are. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start another component. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, let's create a tree. Now I want this tree to be a great big kind of root ball tree. There's going to be some fish swimming around it, and I want it to have some bark on it, and I want it to be places where there's no bark. So I've kind of drawn this in pretty quick with node editing. I'm going to go back and show you guys. If you haven't used node editing, well, you have to draw some vectors to do it. So I'll come in and I'll draw a branch just across the whole piece, and then I'll play with it in node editing. So I'm gonna delete that one back out of there. But so using this draw a line diagram, I rough in trees pretty quick. So I'm going to delete that out of there and go back to this one. Well, this isn't quite where I want it to be yet. So up in this area here, I've indicated there's going to be some bark here and there's going to be no bark here. So I'm going to come back down and I want to create the equivalent of that at the bottom where the bark ends. So I'm going to go back in to node editing tool, and I'm going to just right here, I'm going to kind of decide, I'm going to hit the I key to insert. I'm going to come out a little bit, not quite that much. I'm going to insert another node. I've created some more thickness right there in the tree. I'm going to come over here and do about the same thing. I'm going to come over here and create a node right there. Going to make the tree a little bit thicker so it maybe has that part of it's thicker. Then before I go too much further, some of this down here where it gets, I'll go back to some of this is just a little too linear for me in two straight lines. So if I go back again to node editing, and you can see all the nodes, one of the other tools I'll use is I'll just grab a bunch of those nodes. Now they're all red. If you look close, you can see they're red. And I'll click on the S key, and it just makes, so I can make them all smoother shapes that better suit and I can play with. We'll do more of that when I finish off some of these rocks down here. I've got somebody else coming in. Dawn. Hello, Dawn. So now I'm going to, I can see this tree. I don't like how fat the tree is right here, so I'm going to want the tree to be a little fatter. I grabbed the wrong bit of the... There's the basic shape of our tree. Now I'm going to go back. I'm dropping out of a node editing by clicking on that button. Now I'm going to create the model of that tree. I'm going to go back to modeling. I'm going to click on create a shape. Now this particular shape, I want it. I'm going to set it. Some of this I haven't set already. I'm going to go with a very small base. The base is the flat area before the model starts taking shape. Anywhere in here, if you haven't played with this particular tool, it tells you how rapidly the sides of the model is going to take shape and go up. Right now, it's set for very, you can see most of the curvature here right now occurs in the first part of the shape. I really don't, I want it to be less rapid. Now remember, we have 1.5 inches to play with, so I want this tree to be reasonably thick. A couple things are happening here with this tree. One of them is that you can see it stacking on top of my frame. I don't really want that. But I'm going to call this, let's call this stump. I'm going to apply. I kind of like the general shape and the thickness of the tree. I'm going to close that right now. And so these tools here, you can see very clearly that that's stacked on top of the tree. So the way to get rid of that problem is to go and this is how components combine with each other. So I'm going to go through a process. So if I make that stump, so it does not combine on top of the other elements. So now it's below the frame. Does that make sense? So this tree, I looking at that tree, it's about 7 point. I'm going to make that tree closer to 1 inch thick. Get a little more thickness out of it. Now what I'm going to do next is, I have a Wacom tablet. For any of you that do artwork on 3D digital stuff, I have one which allows me to draw with a pen. And when I'm doing serious modeling, I use the Wacom tablet. But since I'm working with you guys, I'm going to just simply work with my mouse, which isn't quite as precise. I'm going to take this tree and I'm going to do a couple things with it really quick. It's easier for me to just make. I'm going to come up here to the sculpting tool. Now the only thing that shows up now is the tree. I'm going to go to the twiddle. I'm going to drop this down to full size so I have more. I can see more of it. I'm going to turn this tree sideways for a minute because it's easier to make left and right movements than it is down movements with a mouse. So I'm going to use deposit. Now deposit comes with a bunch of different functions here. The diameter. Now I have a roller on my mouse which makes it easy to change the diameter. And then the strength, which you never know till you start to put something on. And then the smoothness. So the smoothness, you look at that, that's a very smooth addition. If I make it less smooth, you can see the difference between the two of those. I kind of like this rough one because it's a little bit more bark-like. And then my favorite brush of all, if you're going to be an artist, you have to know how to undo stuff. I'll just erase what I did there quick because that's not quite what we want to do. I'm going to go back to deposit. I'm going to go a little bit smaller. I'm going to use slightly unsmooth, pretty strong, and I'm going to start laying in some bark in this part of the tree. You'll see if you watch the size of my little mouse here, I'll change it up a bit. And it curves when it gets down here to these root balls, and I think I'll put in a kind of a knot right here. Add in some more texture. Different sizes for the roots and up to there. So I'm going to go over to remove now for a minute. I'm going to click the remove tool, and I'm going to just kind of carve out some of what's in that knot. I'm going to use the remove of a little bit in here to make that bark a little bit more. This is something you need to just play with on how you. And I also use the smudge tool, and the smudge tool kind of blends if I make it smudging really strong. We're going to use the smudge tool a little bit later. So you can see smudging doesn't do a whole lot to branches when there's no other tools there. So back to a twiddle for a minute. Pull this up here. Now I have more bark up here, so I'm going to lay most of my bark in quick, and then I'll come back and show you how I tie those together. So up here. Put a remove in here for a second, and let me go back. I'm going to smooth out this center section for a minute just to round the edges of it a bit more. And then I'm going to use remove. And a lot of these big trees that we have, at least up here, big cottonwoods and stuff, you can see some of the twists. That's a little more than I wanted to do, so I'm going to take some of that out with my undo. I'll go back to remove. And I'll soften that up a bit and make it smaller. And I'm just going to put some curves around that log. It helps the visual. This helps the eye understand that that's a round element. And I'll put some cracks in it. I'm going to give myself a little extra here for this. And I'm going to put just off center, I'm going to crack in this log. Maybe something down here with this branch. And so that's kind of the basics of just making I'm going to say keep that now. And if you use this tool, that means that you can't go back to where you were before. I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to put my tree back where he was. And there's a tree. Now I did that with the other tree already. Oops, I guess. So let's see. I apparently turned the whole thing. You guys are supposed to watch that stuff. So I turned the whole frame and everything. So now we're back to where they're. So I already did the other tree, this branch here. So I'm going to bring it up and add it in. So you don't have to watch me do that same thing all over again. You can see they're kind of impacting each other and hitting each other, and that's not really what we want to have happen. But what I want to do is I'm going to build some rocks really quick with you, and then I'm going to talk to you about how we get the fish to swim in and around these different branches and how we get the branches to not impact each other like you see right here happening. But I'm not going to worry about it for right now. So any questions about making a tree like that? Pretty simple stuff. Aspire. So down below here, I drew on this side. You can see all I did was add in a bunch of ovals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And on the other side, I've already started editing the boulder. So, and all that means is click on this rock right here, and I'm going to go back into the drawing tab. I'm going to hit node editing again, and I just want the rock to have a kind of a flat bottom for this piece of artwork, and we'll make this side a little deeper, and we'll change some of the aspect of that a bit, maybe make the rock a bit more like that. A couple other rocks here we'll do quick. We can move these all around later. So I got a bunch of rocks, kind of at least the lines drawn out for some rocks at the bottom of that piece of artwork, and now I'm going to start. So whenever I paint at the back and I paint forward. So you'd put the sky in first, then the mountains, then the trees, then you'd put the duck in the foreground, sort of thing. It's not unlike that with rocks. So I'm going to go back to my selection tool. I'm going to select some rocks that seem to be in the background and do not override each other. Now remember, this tree is about, what did we set it at, almost an inch thick, right? But it doesn't have much of a base, and we'll end up having to play with that a little bit later on. So I'm going to create a group of rocks. I'm going to create 3 rocks at once, and I'm going to, again, not much of a base height, 6/10 high, a similar kind of an arc to the top, and I'm going to call this back rocks. I'm going to hit apply and see what occurs with my back rocks. So you can see again what's going on with how they stack. They're not stacking the way we want them to do that, but I'm okay with that. I'm going to hit close. And if I move them underneath this, you'll see what immediately happens is now they're behind the tree, because the tree the stump is set up like that, but they're still not in the right place relative to the frame. So I'll move them, but they also have, that doesn't do it. So back to how they stack, we'll click on this. I can't tell you how much time I spend with this trying to get it. So you can see the rocks are now back in behind the elements I want it back in behind. Okay, so it makes a difference using how you stack and then where they are relative in your model, how you put them in your levels. Okay, does that make sense? So something like this is pretty simple, but you start doing something like that train I showed you early in the class, and it starts to get very complicated and get that going. So let's put in a couple more rows of rocks really quick. I've got here, I'm going to get that's a tree, we don't want that. There's another row of rocks. We'll do the same thing. I'm going to add, we're going to go ahead and click this right away. We're going to add a little bit more depth there, because we want those to appear in front of the other stuff. So you can see now I've got the rocks kind of, see the difference right here, and that has to do with the base height. So I increased the base height enough to get them to push out in front of the other rocks. And I'm going to flatten down because I just don't quite like that is. So that's box 2. Or the new component. So we'll do a couple rocks down here. These are going to be fully more ground. These ones I really want to kind of come out a long way, maybe even. So if I put this all into the final shape, I get really pointy rocks. So see how they're very pointy? And see, you can see with this one rock right here, it comes out above the frame, but we're framing it 1.3 inches, and I have 1.5 inches of total material. So if I want a rock, this will be on the frame, but it's just a little too pointy. So I'm going to come back down to more rounded with the rock, I'm going to set the base. 0.75 is not enough, so I'm going to ask the base to be, I have a rock 0.4 thick. I'm going to ask, and I'm going to just intentionally create a problem here. I'm going to ask the base to be 1.1. Now 1.1 was 0.495, about 0.5. If I just make that actually a half an inch, just to make the math easy. So now what we know about this will be our front, we'll call that front rocks. Now what we know about these front rocks is they're probably higher than the thickness of the wood. That makes sense. But they're where I want them to be right now. So I'm gonna leave that the way I want to, just for right now. Okay. So I've got we have this kind of roughly formatted here. What I want to have happening here is a little crappie bass in here chasing a bunch of minnows through a brush pile. Pretty common, if you're out ice fishing, just fishing in general, jigging for crappie bass, you're in thick garbage. So I want to kind of create that occurring, and I want the crappie bass swimming around. So I'm going to bring my little bass up here and put him in. Turn him on. So there's my little buddy, but you can see he's swimming right into the tree right now. He's part of the tree, which we don't want to have happen. So we're going to work on where he goes, and I have one other thing I'm going to bring in here. If you look down here, I have a sea trout, which they don't really swim too many times with crappie bass very often. But I have a sea trout model, and what I like about the sea trout model is it looks a whole lot like a sculpin or stickleback. It looks like a small minnow. Using I grabbed some of my rocks and brought him in here too. We want kind of a school of these small minnows in here, and I'm going to make him, he's going to be my, sea trout's going to be my minnows. So we're going to put a group of those in amongst these rocks. We're going to have the crappie bass trying to grab one or two of them, and we want them swimming around the trees and doing that. So let's play with just how this stuff all stacks. I'm going to eventually I'm going to copy the sea bass and paste him. So we got 4 of them. We'll play around with where they're going to go and how they stack. But the first thing we want to do is get the crappie bass kind of where we want him sitting. So you can see this tree. We'll go back to the stump. If you look at the stump, almost an inch thick. So we have a half an inch above that tree to fit the crappie bass into. And don't know that that's enough, but I'm going to show you some tricks that I use to play with that. If we kind of want him sitting right about where he is. So we'll close that out. We'll go back to crappie bass. And you can see his shape height's about an inch, which towards much height out of the shape. He starts to lose some of his detail. We're down 0.6 of an inch. It's still not bad, but let's bring his base up. So he's fully in front of the log with that base at 0.75. You can see he's kind of fully in front of it. What's going on with his tail? His tail is behind the frame. So what I want to do with that, just to make, remember we have a 1/4 inch above the frame. So I have a little bit more thickness I can use in the crappie bass. But I think what I want to show you is I'm going to do a tilt function right here. If you look over here in the model, I'm going to hit tilt, and I'm going to hit set. Now there's a couple interesting things about set that I just kind of learned. I want to show them to you in a couple different forms. So when it says set, it's telling you where do you want it to tilt from. So if I want to tilt from here to the back of the crafting desk, it's going to tilt the entire model. And I click there, then I come back over here, and I'll set this up so you can watch what it does. I tilt this, and if I just increase the percentage up, the whole model moved up. Do you guys see that? How it came up? And it's that thing. But let's undo that for a minute and go back and say, well, maybe we don't want to do that. So let's go back and say set. And this time we're going to put the set point right here, and we're going to click on the end of the tail. Okay, so now watch what happens this time. And we're going to do the same, about 4% of tilt. Well, that was interesting. So now this is different about tilt than fade. So in that case, did you notice what it did to the head? It lowered the head and raised the tail. I can't say that that's what I thought was going to happen when that occurred. So I'm going to undo that. I'll show you in fade here in a few minutes how it's different. So let's go back and reset. Remember, I'm an artist. I play with this stuff all the time. But I can't necessarily say I technically know all the reasons why it works. So we're above the frame now. I'm going to take a little bit out of the base. A little bit back into the thickness of the model. And combined, we're at about 1.3 inches of total width on the. I keep grabbing it. Sorry about that. So we'll come back to the grab glass in a little bit. So let's grab our. Let's play with this right here. Let's put this stick in front of the log. So we can basically do that by adding base to it. See, we have the same problem here with it's stacking wrong on my frame, so I'm going to go to how it combines, and that ends that problem really quick. Good. And then let's put our primary victim, this little fish right here. This guy right here, but we want him in front of the stick, so it looks like the bass is about to grab him. So again, we need more base height to do that. That's not enough. We're going to add in 1.1. I think that's going to be pretty close. So there we have, you can see that he's kind of lined up with that. You guys get seasick, just turn your head away for a little while I'm doing this. It's like somebody else in a car. I kind of want him, I want him coming out of the carving a little bit, so I'm also going to tilt this little minnow. You can see it creates that kind of that is where that's going on there. So
can you tilt at negative angles?
Explain what by a negative angle you want it to go. That you want it to tilt a different, the head down and the tail up.
Oh, is that how you do it?
Yeah. So in this particular case, that with this guy right here, you can see right now his head's way up with how I set it. That involved me setting it, clicking set at the back of his tail and ending it at his head. But if I take that out of here, now he's flat again, and I say set, and this time I click on his head, and the second click is on his tail, and now what it's telling you is the second place you click is what's going to be raised. So see how his tail came up? Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
All right. You can kind of lower him back down and say maybe that guy is actually diving underneath the branch to get away. And we'll bring another one down here and we'll just get above the branch, one up. Maybe we want his tail just like he's coming out, so we're going to set, we're going to do tilt on this little guy. We're going to set again, and this time his tail up in the air. So I click on his nose, then his tail, and then not enough. A little bit more height. So now I got one of those guys going around the front of the stick and one going around the back. Just try it away. All right, any questions about that? So you can always, there's let me see. You're dropping a large muskie in the middle of this. I don't think anybody wants to put a muskie in the middle of that one. I do have a large bass that you can put in. But you can do the same kind of a thing for. I do a lot of this sort of stuff. Here's a. Maybe we want to have a bluegill in the background. Probably fits better. Maybe put it even down. So that's kind of the basics of what I wanted to show you tonight. Was just about. I know a lot of guys. I sell a lot of individual models like bass or deer or elk or moose, and they all want to go, well, how can I get more environment behind them? And I think if you have Aspire, it's pretty easy to make some pretty looking background, and you just have to play around with how to stack the different components in there. If I was going to finish this now, I would insert another layer. And if you haven't used this tool, this is a pretty new tool. It's create component from visible model. We used to have to bake everything to do carving. Now you don't have to do that. You just say create component, and it takes all the components and it turns into a model. Now what's happening right now is you see everything in level 2 and level 3. So I'm going to turn off all the component pieces and just keep a copy of the visible model. So now I have one model, and I still have all the components of it. So sometime later, someone comes back and say, hey, would you put a carp in there, or want the fish to be bigger, or I want to do something different with how the rocks lay in there, I can go back and dismantle them. So to finish this piece up, I would rename this. I'm going to just say that. I'll rename it here in a minute. But so right now you can see the total height of this is 2.6 inches. So it's way past the thickness I have of the. So I'm going to reset the thickness to 1.5, and I think what I really want to do is I'm going to set the model thickness to 1 inch. And then I'm going to go over and take a look at check my tool path. So this gives me, if I have the models 1 inch thick, it's going to give me a half an inch of wood underneath the model in the background. And that's kind of how that would finish up. So I can remove when I go to turn this into tool path, I grab all the vectors and I would pull all the vectors off. That's all the vectors I used. Oh, I pulled the next row. Blue row. And then I had a couple. So then you can hit this and use, under modeling, use the create vector boundary around this, and it's going to create, in a model like this, it's going to create 2 vectors for you. Well, it's going to create all 1 vector, really. So if you look at this quick, you'll see that this is internal vectors and all the external vectors. So I'll hit the shift button and I'll hit ungroup, and I just want to take that one off, which is the outside vector that I'd use to do the outside cut, and then I will regroup this inner group of vectors in case I want to use them. But mostly I'm going to use that outer vector for the tool path. I would just simply, so what's going on right now is it's going to try to carve all the way through.
Can you check your screen to see if somebody wants to join?
Somebody did.
Okay.
Thanks, Ted. If you carve this right now, if you try to carve this right now, if you use that outer vector, I got to lock the tool in, and tell it to carve, use a 1/4 and 1/8 inch ball node, I hit calculate. What's going to happen in all that airspace? It shouldn't carve anything. It should leave that all sitting up at the regular height. We'll find out in a moment. I know you guys can stand this because you all stand around watching CNC machines carve all day. Yeah.
I don't know, Scott. I've never watched a CNC machine carve all day.
Yeah. We'll take that outside and we'll do a profile cut. And 5.5 is a little bit past depth. I don't take 21 passes to go that far. Let's just 9. Okay. So that's kind of a quick look at composing pieces like that. maybe going a little bit outside of. I would spend some more time. So part of what I did was my crappie bass went off the model, right, completely off the space, so that tail got cut off there. I would probably do something to fix that. You can see it got really flat right here. And I would play with some of these roots and make them come over top of the rocks. I'd make the roots come over the frame a bit. Might put some nuts and bolts on each one of the corners. I've been doing that recently. It looks pretty cool. Yeah, and I probably play a little bit more, some more depth out of the crappie bass. When I'm going to really carve one of these, I spend maybe 2 or 3 times as much time setting it up and reviewing how it looks and making sure I've got everything the way I want it and the movement's right. And you can look at them and see how they're going to carve if that's what you wanted.
Why don't you go ahead and if anybody's got any questions, it's a good time to ask them now. And then you had mentioned about your Etsy place where they could get a copy of this model or a similar model and then practice themselves if they wanted to.
Yeah, so let me go see if I can get that stirred up. Go to that Etsy store where I sell models. So what I'm looking at creating, what I tried to create just before I got on tonight was these 2 models right here, was to make them so they're $2 each. So you can get the sea trout and the crappie bass, and then you'd have those basic models for a couple bucks. So I'll get that set up tonight. It'll have a sale on it, and the password will say Michigan CNC. As soon as I figure out exactly how to get that done. So my gallery is Willow Creek Studio in Willow, Alaska, but Willow Creek Studio is not available in Etsy, so it's Creek Willow Studio Art is where it is. But there's lots of there's a wall search one, for you guys in that part of the world. I just redid that similar type of a complete assembly. It's pretty cool if you have friends that like. This is a giveaway I'm doing this month for Christmas. It's a promotion I'm doing on my website. So this is a finished carving. That's why it's $155. But a lot of guys up here fish for halibut, and it's kind of just a fun. How big is your butt? So I've got a bunch of people listed on my Facebook page how big a halibut they've caught, and I'm going to draw a winner and make them a piece like this for that. And I get a lot of marketing play that way by doing a giveaway if they share and comment. Stuff, and then some little area in the Hendersons. There's the crappie bass down there again. I do a lot of wildlife stuff. There's a walleye eating bluegills, fairies and bass, and all kinds of guys are like denturists and stuff. But there's a fly and a halibut. A wreath. But yeah, I'll send you guys, make sure that Ted has a link for that when I get it fixed. But so yeah, and if you want to try do that, and I will post when I get done with this piece, I'll post it in there as well tomorrow. And if you want to try carve it, I'll have some kind of for any of you guys that buy the person the $4 thing, I'll just email this one over to you, sort of thing. It just has this, just say Michigan CNC when you put the order in the system, and let me know, and I'll send it over to you.
So they find you on Etsy by just typing in Creek Willow Studio?
Yep.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any questions? Any questions out there? Well, Scott, we'd like to thank you very much for being our presenter this month. We've learned a lot. I know I did. Picked up some real nice little tips and pointers here, and we appreciate you sharing your experiences with learning all about 3D carving.
Right. It's fun to talk. You guys live in the heartland of this kind of stuff. I mean, we sit up here in Alaska. I have 2 kinds of wood. That's about it. And you guys are in kind of the manufacturing heartland. And it didn't hear what's going on with CNCs down there. It's very new up here. There's like 4 of us in the state that have CNC machines. So it's fun to see a group of guys working together.
Well, that brings up one question. You said that you were going to use an 1.5-inch piece of wood and you were going to glue it up. Do you start with 1.5 inches and just glue up the width, or do you glue up the thickness?
No, I start. A lot of this stuff I make out of 2x6s. I just take some 2x6s and I'll run them through the planer on the sides, and then I use a biscuit joiner, and that's how I get my larger panels.
Okay, so you're just using a rough fir or a pine?
Yep. Yeah.
And you're finding that's carving okay?
Well, okay, so remember, I'm a hand carver, so I do end up finish carving more often.
Fussing with it, but you're getting the rough feature out of it then.
Yeah, so I do that. I do use panels from the box stores. They have glued up panels that are pretty nice and carved better, and I found some now that aren't just pine, but there's birch panels, countertops and stuff carved real much nicer.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We don't. To get walnut up here or any of that stuff is ridiculously expensive. So most of what my stuff is carved out of pine or birch.
Okay. Cool.
Very good.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you presenting, and we hope everybody has a great night. And I'm going to go ahead and reclaim the presenter role here. And then we're going to try to wrap it up. I just want to remind everybody that if you are watching this on YouTube and you're not on our notification list, all you have to do is send me an email, and I'll notify you when the next Michigan Online CNC webinar is, and you can join us. So with that said, thanks everybody for taking the time to learn and educate all of us together. So have a good afternoon.